Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. We got a lot of sour grapes, a lot of salty chips, a lot of shade being thrown at this organization and this week's news cycle. And on this week's episode, we're going to run you through all of that. A lot of sour grapes, a lot of salty chips. So we're going to get right into that. This first news story has nothing to do with that, but we'll get into that later in the show. Could Dolphins consider DRC? Now, if you're not familiar with that nickname, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, obviously a long time, really good player in this league. I would consider him one of the better playmakers in any secondary for a long time. With some serious questions, again, this comes from Pro Football Rumors. With some serious questions at the number 2 cornerback position, Armando Salguero of the Miami Herald wonders if the Dolphins could use some of their newfound cap space to sign a veteran late in the offseason. He mentions the names of Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie and Jeremy Lane, though Lane's status is up in the air after he pled guilty to reckless driving on what was initially a DUI arrest. In theory, the Dolphins have Cordrea Tankersley and Tony Lippett to duke it out for the job, but Tankersley struggled as a rookie, and Lippett is still recovering from Achilles surgery. That could also move Bobby McCain, who just signed a 4-year, $27 million extension, to the outside. But he made a name for himself covering slot receivers instead of shuffling McCain or first-round pick Minkah Fitzpatrick to different places. The Dolphins may instead prefer to dip into the free agent market. So I have a lot of different feelings on this. Number one, I think Armando's wrong. I don't think we need a second corner. I actually liked the way Cordrea played. I think a lot of people forget he got off to a very hot start when he was just thrown into the lineup due to injuries. He had a lot of really good games, and I think towards as the season went along, as most rookies do, they hit that rookie wall because they've just been working their tail off from the start of the year all the way up through the regular season, and it just everybody talks about it. They just hit that rookie wall. They're just exhausted at that point. And I think that happened to him. It happened to him. And also, he's a young player. He's a young player who's still developing. He's going into his second season. So I feel like Cordrea is a very, very good player for his age. And at this stage of his career, I think he's as good as you could ask for. I mean, he's not Patrick Peterson. He's not Darrelle Revis. I mean, he's not a once-in-a-generation talent, but he's still a good corner. Not everybody can be that, and I don't know why we expect that from him. Obviously, he was a third-round pick. He's not, again, a once-in-a-generational talent. He's just a good player. So I feel like he's definitely good enough to play at that second cornerback spot going into his second season. And like I said, I think we all saw a lot of good things from him his rookie year. So I still feel comfortable with that. And Tony Lippett. I mean, yeah, he's coming off of an Achilles injury. That might be a thing to be worried about in the early 2000s or the 90s or the 80s when medicine wasn't what it is now. People get Achilles, tear their Achilles, tear their ACL, have ankle problems, and it's not even an issue in today's world because, I mean, we've seen Deshaun Watson. He's tore his ACL 3 times. You know what I'm saying? So, it really hasn't done anything to his athletic ability. We just live in a different time. So I don't think that injury will affect him at all. I mean, the man has, some of the best doctors on the planet Earth taking care of him. So I don't think that's an issue at all. And we forget that he was coming off of a 4-interception season. He was a tremendous player for us that year. Helped us get into the playoffs. And really was a lockdown corner for us, at the tail end of that season. Made a lot of big plays for us to win football games. And a lot of big games as well, divisional games that would eventually catapult us into the playoffs. So Tony Lippett, I have zero reason to believe that he is not an NFL starting number 2, and an above average one, by the way. So I just completely disagree with Armando. I think this is just, I don't know. I really don't know why you would even wonder that. And even comparing, I mean, we don't need DRC. We have a lot of really good secondary players. I feel like our secondary is the strength of the defense, to be honest with you. I really, really, really like it. I think it's going to be really, really good this upcoming season. And hopefully we can stay healthy. And I think we've added a lot of depth. And people forget about Torrey McTyer, who's in the wings, who had a really good preseason last year, who looked really, really good. I still think he has a future in this league. So there's a lot of depth that we added. Obviously, Cornell Armstrong, who we got added in the draft, who a lot of people in the building are very excited about. Cordrea Tankersley, Bobby McCain, Rashad Jones. A lot of people talking very highly of him. So I think the secondary is fine. I don't think there's any worries at all. I think everybody's in their prime at this point. Everybody should be hitting their stride when you talk about all the young players. So we don't need him. And that's just my opinion on it. I completely disagree with that. This is a quick news story. Dolphins signed 3 draft picks. They have signed Durham Smythe, obviously the fourth round tight end. Jerome Baker, Kalen Ballage, Mike Gesicki has also. Wait, let's see here. Tight end Mike Gesicki is the last straggler. Okay, so he has not been signed yet. He probably has been signed since this article was crafted. I'm not completely sure about that. Yeah. So I think that's all for the quick news story. So let's get into some of the article stories here. This story comes from the Sun Sentinel. Omar Kelly, things that we have learned with 1 week left in the Dolphins offseason program. Number one thing that we've learned, Ryan Tannehill still has his mobility despite his knee injury and isn't afraid to use it. It's impossible to say there's no cause for concern regarding Tannehill's surgically repaired left knee until he's taken a few hits in a game. But for now, the Dolphins starting quarterback is running around without a knee brace and seems to be as athletic as he was in his rookie season 6 years ago. Tannehill's moving around in the pocket is better than ever, and in hopes that it translates to the field to his best performance as an NFL starter, because it's about time to prove he belongs in the top half of NFL starting quarterbacks. So that's great news. Obviously, that was a huge concern about Tannehill's mobility and whether he still had it. Obviously that's a good report from Omar, who's a super critical guy. So if it wasn't what it used to be, he would say. The number 2 thing that we learned so far in this offseason, Kenyon Drake's on the brink of stardom, but Dolphins are hopeful that he can keep his head straight. Drake has always flashed game-changing talent going back to his days at Alabama, but few coaches have been willing to make him a feature back in their offense. Drake's 4.8 yards per carry average from last season helped him earn that role this season, and head coach Adam Gase is banking on age, comfort in Miami's offense, and Frank Gore's presence in the locker room to help Drake blossom into the pro that he has the potential to be. So yeah, obviously, no doubt, Kenyon Drake is I've been, ever since we drafted the kid, I've always loved him. I always thought he had the talent to be one of the better versatile running backs in the NFL. And obviously I feel like he's always been a better fit in this offense than Jay ever was, just because of his versatility and his ability to create mismatches on the field, which is the reason why Adam Gase is such a successful offensive coordinator, and why he's so successful calling plays, is he always seems to get the right players on the right guy for them to be the most successful that they can possibly be. And that's why Adam Gase was so coveted when he left Denver, is because what he was able to do with quarterbacks and get them the matchups that best allow them to succeed. And obviously Kenyon Drake's better than that. The best at that on the team, probably, because he's so deadly in both facets of the offense. This next news story, excuse me. The number 3 thing that we've learned so far in this offseason, the interior of Miami Dolphins' offensive line might no longer be a problematic area. Again, this comes from the Sun Sentinel. It's from Omar Kelly. In past seasons, the interior of Miami Dolphins' offensive line could be counted on to wreck a game or 6, especially when injuries become a factor. Exactly. The addition of Josh Sitton, who signed a 2-year deal worth $13.5 million this spring, and the development of Jesse Davis, a former practice squad player who played admirably as a starter for the final 11 games of the 2017 season. He seemingly helped that unit stabilize while these practices don't feature pads and therefore have limited contact, the quarterback's pocket rarely collapses from the inside during sessions the media has watched. But then again, nobody's lining up against Ndamukong Suh, so this assessment might be premature. But I mean, again, thank God they're showing at least some promise. And obviously, talent-wise, it's definitely better than last year. Jesse Davis, the only thing I really have, I hope that he gets better at in year 2 as a starting guard. Well, this will be his first year as, if he starts from day 1. But it's just physicality. We just really struggled in the running game and being physical and moving people off the ball. And if he can just get better at that, just get stronger, just a little bit more physical in the running game, he'll be fine because his pass blocking skills are really, really good. So we'll see what happens. He's obviously a super athletic guy as well, so he can pull, he can swing, he can do all of those kinds of things that you want your guard to be able to do and get out in front of the running back. So it's a good news that the interior is finally looking good because that was a huge issue in 2017, was constantly getting negative yardage and getting hit in the backfield. So hopefully this group is more physical, can stay healthy, and we can get on the right track. So, again, that's good news. The number 4 thing we've learned so far in this offseason, linebacker Raekwon McMillan has showcased range coming back from his knee injury. Kenyon Drake runs a legit 4.4 in the 40-yard dash, so it was impressive to see Raekwon McMillan track him down on the sidelines to stop a wheel route for a loss during practice. Not only was that one defensive play evidence that McMillan's play speed is faster than his 4.6 140 time he ran in the NFL Combine, but it serves as proof he's fully recovered from the procedure that he had to repair his ACL in the right knee. In August, the Dolphins need McMillan to be a consistent playmaker in this defense. So obviously that was the biggest gripe with Raekwon, was his ability to be a 3-down player, cover people coming out of the backfield, and obviously, as Omar is highlighting in that piece right there, covering a wheel route with Kenyon Drake and obviously tackling him for a loss. Is just great news, and I can't wait to see Raekwon play. Obviously, the entire building is excited about it. They really believe that Raekwon is the answer in the middle of this defense, and I just can't wait. This next news story, God dang it, I keep doing it. The number 5 reason, or the 5th thing that we've learned so far this offseason, Dolphins have a deeper receiver unit, one that might be able to weather injuries. The Dolphins have possessed a table of talented receivers over the past few years, but injuries have watered down that unit's production level from 2016 to 2018. This offseason, Miami's front office signed 2 veteran receivers in Danny Amendola and Albert Wilson to ensure the production remained high if 1 or 2 frontline players went down. Amendola and Wilson's additions also lit a fire under young, unproven players such as Jakeem Grant, Leonte Carroo, Rashawn Scott, Malcolm Lewis, and Drew Morgan, who are all battling for the 5th and 6th receiver roles. One player I want to highlight on that, and yes, Omar is absolutely correct, the receiver group is just better than it was last year, is Drew Morgan. I feel like a lot of people forget about him from last year, but he had a tremendous offseason with this particular or this franchise. And Adam Gase actually boasted about him in his press conference, talking about how much he's improved from year 1 to year 2. And I feel like not a lot of people are talking about that, but I'm excited to see what Drew Morgan does in this offseason, especially in preseason in year 2 with the Dolphins here. The number 6 reason, or the 6th thing, I keep messing this up. The 6th thing that we've learned so far this offseason about the Miami Dolphins. A tight end hasn't stepped forward to claim a starting spot. Pick a name, any name, on the Dolphins tight end depth chart, and there's a reasonable chance that player might end up becoming one of the team's 2 starting tight ends come September. The competition between A.J. Derby, Marquise Gray, Mike Gesicki, Gavin Escobar, Durham Smythe, and Thomas, I can never say his name right, you guys know what I'm talking about, is wide open. Gray, Escobar, and Smythe are battling for the inline role, which typically serves as a blocking specialist. And Derby, Gesicki, and Durante, however you say his name, Thomas, are the team's seam threat options. Expect 3 to remain on Miami's 53-man roster. The player who excels at both roles could easily step into the forefront. And we're going to talk about Mike Gesicki again in this podcast, or in the show, so we're not going to talk about it right now, but we've had a lot of reports about how Mike has been doing. The seventh thing that we've learned so far this offseason. Both of Miami Dolphins rookie kickers have sledgehammers for legs. It's become routine to see 30-yard field goals land on the roof of the Dolphins Davie facility, which isn't normal. 30-yard field goals that land on the roof of the Dolphins Davie facility, which isn't normal. But the kind of leg power that rookie... I guess he meant that is normal. I don't know why. It's just a weird thing to put there. Anyway, the leg player that rookie kicker Jason Sanders, the team's 7th-round pick, and Greg Joseph, a former Florida Atlantic standout, have been showcasing in their battle to determine who replaces Cody Parkey, who signed with the Chicago Bears as a free agent. So far, Sanders has been more consistent in practice when the media watches, but special team coordinator Dan Rizzi says the battle is closer than it seems. I think he's just keeping people on their toes. So they keep competing. And that is all the things that we have learned so far this offseason. So there you go, guys. A lot of interesting stuff in there. Obviously, it's good to hear that Tannehill's doing well with the knee. Obviously, he's mobile as ever. I think the tight end situation is very interesting. Drew Morgan and the receivers are looking sexy, which is great news. So yeah, there's a lot of things to look, and obviously the interior of the offensive line, that's a huge thing, man. Out of everything that I would have loved to see improved, it would have been more consistency in the interior of the offensive line because it was so bad last year. This next news story comes from the Sun Sentinel. Dolphins Jakeem Grant poised to become a factor in the passing game. At 5'7", 169 pounds, Jakeem Grant has been among the most impressive players during the Miami Dolphins offseason workouts, including this week's minicamp. Cordrea Tankersley sees it. Cordrea said about Jakeem, quote, "The man is rolling." Wide receiver Devontae Parker sees it too. Devontae Parker said, quote, "He's been very aggressive this offseason and just attacking the ball and everything. High pointing everything. He's learned all these different positions and he's doing a great job. He might have to do better than, quote, great. However, he plans on breaking into a Dolphins wide receiver rotation that already is led by returning stars Devontae Parker and Kenny Stills, and newcomers Danny Amendola and Albert Wilson. Amendola, acquired from New England, and Wilson, acquired from Kansas City, are both trying to take Grant's job at slot receiver. It's why they were acquired." Grant said, quote, "That just added fuel to the fire." Apparently, Grant, whose 13 receptions, 203 yards, 2 touchdowns season of 2017, that was highlighted by a 65 catch-and-run touchdown at Kansas City, likes the competition. Grant said he wants to show how he's a complete player and not just a stereotypical return man. So, yeah, that's great news right there, guys. Obviously, Jakeem Grant has always showed a lot of promise. He just needs to be more consistent. He struggled with drops last season in practice, and I think that's why he didn't get a larger role earlier on. But once we switched him to the outside, that's when he really excelled. And again, that's a golden nugget in there when Devontae Parker said he's doing a great job at all positions, not just outside in the slot. So that way we can line him up wherever we think he can be the most successful. I think is just great news because that was a big part of his game. He was one-dimensional. He really struggled in the slot when he was lined up in the slot. But when you lined him out on the outside, where corners give you a little bit more cushion, they're not all up in your face, where you have to get off some of those press coverages and stuff of that nature. They're less physical, and you give him a little room. That opens up a lot for him, and obviously utilizing him in the screen game, getting him in the open field really helped him, and he showed flashes last year. So hopefully he can build upon that. And like Devontae Parker said, he's doing a great job of learning all of the positions on the offense, which is something that Adam Gase wants out of his receivers and something that he expects out of them, and that should lead to more playing time from Jakeem Grant. And again, he adds an electricity to this offense that we haven't had in a while. Obviously, he really is good when he gets the ball in open field. Alright, so this next news story comes from the Sun Sentinel again, and it is concerning Devontae Parker and what he had to say about some of his doubters out there. So hang on, it is loading. I apologize, guys. Thing is loading. Okay, here we go. Dolphins receiver Devontae Parker is well aware that things have not gone according to plan in his first 3 NFL seasons. Injuries have slowed his development, but this could be the year he plays up to his potential. At least that's how Parker is approaching this season. Devontae said, quote, "Not where I wanted to be." Parker said of how his career has gone so far. Quote, "Just simple as that." Parker, who spoke after Wednesday's minicamp session, has been saddled with various injuries since being drafted in the first round in 2015. A sprained ankle that caused him to miss 3 games last season was the latest in a long list of setbacks. He missed 6 regular season games and 3 preseason games in college at Louisville. He was sidelined 7 games in 2014 because of a foot injury. Parker has earned the label of, quote, "injury prone." Devontae said, quote, "Just stay healthy, and if I'm not healthy, I'll fight through it." Last year, Parker caught 57 passes for 670 yards and a touchdown, but drew his share of criticism for underachieving. A month ago, former Dolphins receiver Chris Chambers questioned Parker's work ethic and maturity. On Twitter earlier this week, Parker responded by saying, quote, "Nobody cares about Chambers' opinion." When asked about it Wednesday, Parker downplayed the exchange. He said he's met most expectations from the coaching staff with the exception of injuries he can't control. Alright, so I figured we would stop it right there. So again, this just highlights Devontae. I guess he recognizes it and it does bother him. Even though Devontae is not a talkative, he's not like a Chad Ochocinco or Terrell Owens. He's not an outspoken guy. He doesn't express what he's feeling all the time and put that in people's face. He's a really quiet dude who just goes about his business, and you can tell that it's getting to him, and he's upset about it, and that he wants to succeed in the NFL. So we'll see. We'll see what he does this season. Obviously, he's way too talented to be, going out there and grabbing 57 passes for 670 yards. We expect at least 1,000-yard seasons out of him, and especially at this point in his career where he's deadlocked into his prime. So hopefully we start seeing that from him, and I hope we do. And hopefully he uses this as motivation instead of sulking in it like, oh, everybody hates me, everybody. How about you use it as motivation? Use that anger to push you forward. And that'll just help you get better. And I think hopefully he does do that. He takes the criticism as fuel. We'll see, man. I don't know, man. I really, it's hard to get a beat on Devontae Parker because he is so calm and cool. Like he's not a very boisterous guy. He's not a very, like I said, a very expressive man. He's not like Jarvis Landry, who's running up and down the field constantly with his head on fire. It's just hard to get a read on him, and he's like, dude, like, are you? I don't know where you stand. He's very much. He reminds me a lot of AJ Green, who's just a very quiet player. This next news story comes from the Dolphins Wire. Let's see here. Dolphins offensive coordinator believes Kalen Ballage can be an offensive weapon. During OTAs and mandatory minicamp this spring, Kalen Ballage has looked like an NFL running back. Ballage obviously has the size of a prototypical running back at 6'3", 229 pounds. But he also has demonstrated excellent speed for a man of his stature. This is likely why Dolphins offensive coordinator Dow Longus believes Ballage could be a weapon even as a rookie. He said, quote, "You want guys," this is from Dow Longus. Dow Longus said, quote, "You want guys you really like a guy who can play on all 3 downs. You don't want to be limited by a smaller stature guy, but you've got to take out on 3rd down, or a guy that Kenyon Drake is a guy who can play all 3 downs." I think Kalen Ballage fits the vision as well. He can catch the football. He can be a weapon out of the backfield, but he's also big enough in pass protection. So I feel like that kind of got confusing. He's basically, what he meant was Kalen Ballage is just like Kenyon Drake. He can play all 3 downs. He can do those things in the pass game that we need him to do. He can also run the football at a high level. And obviously, he says he's a big dude, so he fits what we need him to do in pass protection. Because the way he said that was very weird. Ballage didn't get a bulk of carries at Arizona State, as he finished with almost 2,000 yards and 227 touchdowns in 4 seasons. That could be a reason he slipped to the 4th round during this year's draft. GM Chris Greer said he could answer that better than I can. In terms of when asked about Kalen's production, Dow Loggins said, "I liked him. Quote, I liked him and was really fired up when we drafted him." Again, there's a lot of reasons for his production not being as high as it should be, but when the man did get his opportunities to shine, he did do that. He did dominate his competition. So, I really don't have any issues with that. I mean, the way they run their offense, especially in the Pac-12, and in most colleges these days, it's the most gimmicky, not really all that thought out stuff ever, and it's a lot of passing, a lot of quick screens, just a lot of craziness going on. Not a lot of smash mouth football. If this was back in the dang 90s, early 2000s, 80s, and Kalen Ballage was coming out, I guarantee you that production would look way better from a rushing perspective, and would even be close. You just look at he reminds me a lot of DeMarco Murray. Kalen does. I just don't think he has I've never seen a running back have that quick jump step that DeMarco did. He just would jump in and out of holes effortlessly, and he had that. In some running backs, you see that they have that innate ability to just always gain a yard, and it's like, God dang, man, can you just chill out for 2 seconds? It's just so hard to tackle you. Matt Forte had that, Shady has that, I'm trying to think of it. AP had that, he had that, Zeke has it, Todd has it, a lot of really good running backs have it, and I feel like Kalen has that too when you watch him play. You rarely see him lose yards on plays, unless obviously 50 people are in the backfield. But if there's one guy loose and there's one guy free in the backfield, he usually does a good job of making that guy miss and pushing forward, which is a really good trait to have. Some running backs that you watch, you're like, man, he just has it. And I feel like when you watch Kalen, you see that. Same thing with Kenyon. When you watch him play, you're just like, man, he just has whatever that is that just makes a really good running back. And it's just like poetry in motion. So I feel like both of those guys, when I went and watched them, they just have that. And we have one of the best who ever did it in terms of just always gaining a yard and having the greatest football instincts was Frank Gore. So it's nice for them to learn from the one of the best to ever do it. I'm telling you guys right now, and I've said this multiple times since we drafted him, Kalen is going to be one of those guys that it's just going to be like, how did so many teams pass on this kid? He's going to be one of those late route running backs. And again, he doesn't have to be a superstar. He doesn't have to be Ezekiel Elliott. He doesn't have to be Todd Gurley. He doesn't have to be that good. He's not a first-round pick. He's not somebody that, man, you're going to change our running game because we've struggled for years with that. No, dude. He's just going to come in when his number is called to make plays. And I feel that's exactly what he's going to do. And I cannot wait to see him play on Sundays. So this next news story, we got to stop the bus. We got to stop the ice cream trucks. We got to stop every motor vehicle in the planet right now, because this is some serious business right now, ladies and gentlemen. If you saw this as a Dolphins fan through the week, I'm sure it ticked most of you guys off, because it ticked me off. Because this is some salty grapes. These are some salty garlic chips that I do not appreciate. And this next news story comes from the Sun Sentinel. Tannehill would be wise to hear what Landry and Mike Pouncey had to say. Again, this comes from the Sun Sentinel. This is about the pressure on Ryan Tannehill, how they've turned the locker room over to him, and why it's really, no, I really mean this season, now or never for him. But I don't want this to come off as just another rant about the Miami Dolphins quarterback situation. I'll repeat what I said. Tannehill is good enough. This is not my words. This is David Hyde's words. Tannehill is good enough if those around him are good enough. But Jarvis Landry's shot fired from Cleveland this past week raised a point. And it's not the direct point Landry raised, it's the direct point Landry raised, which is his new quarterbacks, Tyrod Taylor and Baker Mayfield, are better than, quote, what I had in Miami, as he said. You never know how to take words of divorced players. Maybe Landry is right. Taylor has a better career pass rating, 91.2, than Tannehill's 86.5. Stop it right there. This is when I read that, I almost threw something through the window. I almost lost it. Now let's back up a little bit. let's back up a little bit. This is the same quarterback that barely attempted passes in Buffalo. This is the same quarterback that handed off to number 25 in the backfield, who accounted for almost 80% of their total yards last season. This is a quarterback who's never thrown for 4,000 yards in a game. This is a quarterback who I don't even know. Let's look at his career log. How many times has he passed for it? 40, 50 times in a game. 38 times in a game. Tyrod Taylor has never been asked, ever in his career, and he's never been the quarterback who can carry a team on his arm. He's just not that player. He never will be. He's not a prolific passer. Tannehill was that when he wasn't even ready. Our offensive coordinators, our offensive coaches expected him to be that. Just look at the Joe Philbin era alone, for God's sakes, and how many times Tannehill was passing a ridiculous amount of times for a quarterback who was a developmental prospect coming out of college with not a lot of talent around him. Okay? We're talking about two completely different quarterbacks. Tyrod Taylor was never asked to be a game changer. He was asked to be a game manager. Okay? And like I said before, Tyrod has always had a really good running game ever since he's been in Buffalo. If you give Tannehill that running game, even with the weapons that Tyrod had in Buffalo, I guarantee you he would have better numbers. And I guarantee you the Bills would have won more games. Because my quarterback, number 17, can actually push the ball down the field with his arm. Unlike Tyrod Taylor, who's more of a game-managing quarterback, who doesn't have great accuracy on a consistent basis. So that is why my dude Tyrod Taylor over here has a 91.2, Tannehill has 86.5. They're just two totally different play styles. And when I saw it, I was like, that's not even, at least put it in context, for God's sakes. Don't just say, oh, this guy has a better pass. Of course he does. The man barely passes a game, man. I mean, was there a game that he even had over 25 pass attempts, for God's sakes, last season? Tannehill does that in half for most of his career, for God's sakes. And that's the difference. And that just I had to point that out before we went along, before I forgot. Maybe Landry was wrong. Tannehill had a 93.6 passer rating in 2016 and 100.7 in his final 8 games before getting hurt. That's beyond Taylor, and more than Mayfield can be expected to do out of the blocks. Landry, later in the Cleveland interviews, even said Tannehill was good enough to lead a winner. Even said that Tannehill was, quote, good enough to lead a winner. What the heck does that even... But Landry wasn't alone in taking a shot at Tannehill. Senator Mike Pouncey said upon his arrival in San Diego to play with, quote, an elite guy like quarterback Philip Rivers. Stop the bus right there. Here's what I want to break down for you guys. Philip Rivers, all-time great quarterback, is going to go in the Hall of Fame. Probably the most talented and most prolific quarterback that the San Diego Chargers have ever had. Right? The team that was... And then you can use the same analogy with Tannehill. Okay? Tannehill didn't come into the league when Philip Rivers came into the league with LaDainian Tomlinson, Lorenzo O'Neal at fullback, a great offensive line, right? Really good receivers, and Antonio Gates, who's one of the greatest tight ends in his prime at the time, with Marty Schottenheimer, who's a good head coach, coming into the league. He did not have that stability. He did not have that talent around him. And Philip obviously came out of the gates on fire because he was a talented guy who had talent surroundings, right? And this is the last point I'm going to make, and we're going to move on from this article because I just think it's a bunch of baloney. And in case we're getting this mixed up, Mike Pouncey said, again, quote, upon arriving in San Diego, he's really happy to, quote, play with an elite guy. And, you know, Mike has dealt with a lot of different quarterbacks when he was in Miami. I don't blame him for saying what he said because it's not just Tannehill, right? He played with Jay Cutler, he played with Chad Henne, he played with Matt Moore. He's played with a lot of so-so quarterbacks. He's played with a lot of terrible quarterbacks. So I don't blame him for being upset or anything like that and all that other stuff. I'm not mad at Mike. But I do want to point this out. If Mike thinks he's going to go to a team that's this New England Patriots juggernaut, that's not right. And the original point I was making is Philip Rivers had early on success because his team was built the right way and the organization was built the right way until their GM legitimately ruined everything because he couldn't get along with LaDainian Tomlinson. I'm getting off track here. My point that I want to make is if you look at Philip Rivers, I don't know, the last 7 years, there's not a lot of winning going on. In a lot of cases, we've had better records than Philip Rivers did with Tannehill. And I'm talking about not the, I think the 3 straight seasons we went 8-8 early on in Tannehill's career. Just not a lot of winning. And Philip, as great as he's been throughout his career, not a lot of winning for the majority of his career, right? Even though he's, quote, an elite quarterback, not a lot of winning going on. Okay, so I wanted to point that out, to be fair to Tannehill. Like, comparing him to Philip Rivers, right? It's like, yeah, Philip's a great quarterback, but not a lot of winning going on over the last 7 years. And I feel like it's just, like, being so unfair. It's not even funny. Like, everybody, like, it upsets me. This is one last point I wanted to make before we move on. There's a connect the dots theme here. Greg Jennings said Tannehill was, quote, far from elite upon leaving in 2016. Mike Wallace wouldn't even answer questions about him upon leaving in 2015. This isn't even revisiting the full... Okay, god dang it. The whole Brent Grimes situation. Don't even get me started on all this. Here's the question. What do you do with all this? Write it off as a disgruntled former players. Explain each one away. Here's the deal. Greg Jennings, you're old. The man complained about... The man started talking... I can't remember what he said about Aaron Rodgers, but he was saying, like, stupid stuff about Aaron. I cannot remember what he said, but he was hating on Aaron Rodgers when he left as well. He said some stupid... I wish I had the quote in front of me, but he said something so ridiculous. So he needs to shut his mouth. The whole Brent Grimes situation, that was just a whole fiasco that I don't even know why his wife was hating on Tannehill. Like, I don't even understand why that ever came about. Why Tannehill his name was ever, dragged through the mud. And obviously it's not even forget about the straight... I mean, we had to go to court over it. I mean, Brent Grimes was getting his raped by every division receiver that year, known to man. You talk about Brandon Marshall, Sammy Watkins, Julian Edelman. It doesn't matter who it was. My man was getting smacked in the face hard. He had a terrible year that season. Brent Grimes was playing awful. And again, I want to make sure I'm being real with you guys. Tannehill is not a saint. Okay, he is not some perfect player by any stretch of the imagination. Okay. But my God, he does not deserve all of this ridiculous hate that he's getting. Jarvis Landry, I want to point this out before I move on, because Jarvis is going to get some slappage too right now. I did it, Philip obviously. Let's be real, right? Let's be real for a second. Not only did Jarvis Landry lie in the middle of this interview and say that he never, Tannehill never threw with him. And again, I know you probably don't like this, right, because I'm ranting. I just want to get through these last 2 points. Juice lied about a lot of things in that interview, number one. He lied about Tannehill. Not a lot of things. He lied about Tannehill never threw with him in the offseason. That's a lie. You guys can go watch past news updates that I've done where we talked about that a bajillion times. Number two, when Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network went through Jarvis Landry's, all of his touchdowns, I think it was all 7, he had 7, 9, I can't remember. None of them were above 8 yards, right? And he said every single one of those were great designs by Adam Gase. So, hey man, if we want to hate, the hate goes all the way around and back to you as well, for God's sake, 'cause you're not some perfect player either. And I'm just sick and tired of the man getting all this hate. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And again, the whole Philip Rivers thing, the reason I really wanted to bring that up is you could be a really, really good player at the quarterback position. But if your organization sucks and doesn't know what they're doing half the time, and the team around you isn't that good, you're not going to win anything. Look at Brady. It's not just number 12 going around each and every single week, does it by himself. He has Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft, who I don't even want to get into. I think that man gets way too much credit for what Bill has done with that organization. But he has the most stable organization in the league. He has a player, he has a coach that knows how to build a football team, that knows how to build a winning culture, that knows how to prepare week in and week out. Okay? So again, it's not all fairies and butterflies and roses out here. I just wanted to point that out. In fairness to Tannehill, because I felt like nobody was defending the dude, for God's sakes. And I felt like I had to present an argument that defends him in some way, because I feel like this is just ridiculous. Nobody's going to at least craft an article in number 17's defense at all. Nobody's going to stick up for him. So I felt like I had to at least make an argument for him on some of these ridiculous things that people were saying about him. I felt like I had to bring some of those things up. This next news story comes from the Palm Beach Post. Could Stephon Anthony be under the radar answer for the Miami Dolphins? Okay, so this comes from the Palm Beach Post. All this talk about 3 safety formations, which the Dolphins haven't really practiced yet, and the return of linebacker Raekwon McMillan and the drafting of linebacker Jerome Baker. Completely lost in the shuffle was former first-round pick Stephon Anthony. Anthony is still here, and actually, as of right now, he's the starting Dolphins linebacker. Anthony is still young and still fast and still strong, and still has the potential to make a positive impact. Let's see here. Quote from Matt Burke. He said, he, quote, earned it by the same way all of the guys earned it. Matt Burke said of Anthony taking more spring reps as the starter. Matt said, quote, he's been working hard. It's always difficult to come in the middle of the season, come from a different scheme and pick things up. He works really, really hard. He's a big athlete. He's almost 6'3". He's 240-something. He can run, and we all like those type of body types. Burke believes a full offseason with the Miami Dolphins will really benefit Anthony, who was criticized in New Orleans for not having the physical tools, but his ability of having the physical tools, but the problem with him is consistently diagnosing offensive plays. The Dolphins consider Anthony 25 a part of their 2018 draft class, as he was obtained for a 4th rounder. So there you go, guys. Again, that's been the problem with him. Instincts, not so much physical traits. He's always been obviously a very, very good athlete. It's just his ability to be a football player has come into question with a lot of different coaches, and that's the reason the former first-round pick was shipped out of New Orleans so quickly, is because of his ability, not necessarily the greatest instincts in the world. So hopefully that's something that we can coach and help him, get better at. I really don't see it happening. I really don't see Stephon Anthony being the starter day 1, week 1. I still think it's going to be Kiko, Raekwon, and Jerome. I still think maybe somehow Stephon outplays Kiko, but I doubt it. Final news story of the day: Mike Gesicki struggled in spring practices, and again, I know this is not something that everybody wants to hear right now. The Miami Dolphins' second-round pick seemed to struggle during the team's practice the past couple of weeks. Mike Gesicki would flash at times, but appeared to be lost in other times. It's early, and he still has training camp in the preseason to claim the starting tight end position. So yeah, there you go. Apparently, Mike's not doing. And again, they really didn't detail what he was struggling with. I would like to know what the specific things he was struggling with. I'm assuming maybe he was struggling. I don't know. It's very one-sided, I guess you could say. Really doesn't explain or detail how he struggled, so I can't really have an opinion on something. I mean, yeah, he struggled. Well, why is he struggling? I don't know. Just kind of walks away. It's like, okay, but I don't know what I don't know what I'm supposed to say about that. Didn't really detail why he's struggling, so I don't know. Take that with a grain of salt. Obviously, Mike's super talented, and I expect him to be a very, very, very impactful player this upcoming season. So yeah, that was it, guys. I apologize for the rant in the middle of there. I know that took up a lot of time. You guys want to get through the news. That's all you guys are here for. I understand that. But again, it's unfair to Tannehill just gets hit in the face. I mean, people are hitting him with wiffle ball bats. The kids are throwing pies at his face. I mean, a 4-year-old is tripping him while he's walking in towards us. I mean, it's terrible. It's humiliating, and nobody is sticking up for him. And it's just ridiculous. I mean, people have to argue for him as well, and it's not always excuses either. It's just no, Tannehill is actually a good player, and these are the reasons why, and these are the reasons why what you're saying is ridiculous. So again, I feel like nobody does that for him half the time. So I'm sorry if it kind of got ranty there, but again, and the whole Philip Rivers thing, I think, is a great analogy for you can be a great quarterback. And even Dan Marino, I mean, everybody thinks it was always, cookies and cream and all this other stuff when Dan was starting. Dan was one of the most prolific football players of all time, but not even his greatness could consistently carry a terrible roster. Okay, again, football is a team game, and everybody has to show up, and everybody has to be under one roof and grind together. And that wasn't always the case when Tannehill was the starting NFL quarterback. It never was the case until Adam Gase got here and led this team to 10-6. So I just feel like I had to bring that up. Let me know what you guys think about what Jarvis said and what Mike said. Do you agree with him? Do you not agree with him? I am Skagster1083, and I will see you guys in the next one.